Good morning. Welcome to Morning Meditation. Today's Wednesday, September 21st. Today, we celebrate the feast of St. Matthew, the apostle and evangelist. And our gospel reading for daily Mass today gives us the great story, the powerful story of the calling of Matthew. And today, as we reflect, as we meditate together, let's read this gospel together. This comes from the Gospel of Matthew, of course. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9, verses 9 through 13. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the customs post. He said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. While he was at table in his house, many tax collectors and sinners came and sat with Jesus and his disciples. The Pharisees saw this and said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" He heard this and said, "Those who are well do not need a physician, but the sick do. Go and learn the meaning of the words, 'I desire mercy, not sacrifice.' I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." It's a story that many of us know, this Matthew, a tax collector, being called by Jesus. And many of us know that tax collectors, of course, were looked down on by the Jewish society with the way that the Romans had set up how they would collect their taxes, that they would look for folks of the conquered nation that would serve kind of as the middlemen in collecting the taxes so that they would become almost reviled by their country, by their brothers and sisters of their country, and they wouldn't pay them very well, so they'd have to kind of raise the taxes so that if we're taking 20%, they're taking an additional 5%, or maybe even an additional 20% just to get by. And tax collectors became this really reviled part of society in the conquered states of the Roman Empire. And so we see here that this is Matthew. We see tax collectors and sinners thrown around all the time. And what I think is so beautiful in this gospel is just how subtle and short this depiction of the call of Matthew is. All we simply get is Jesus saw a man named Matthew sitting at the customs post, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. We think about what this would mean for Matthew, sitting at his customs post. The show The Chosen, that many of us might be familiar with. If you're not, it's a free show that depicts really the story of the Gospels. Very well done, and they do a great job of showing just day to day what the life of a tax collector would be. That yes, you would be potentially more wealthy than your brothers and sisters of your nation, but just continually looked down upon. That people continue just to give you daggers for eyes. We can imagine Matthew sitting here day to day, and then suddenly this rabbi, someone who you certainly should not associate with, but this rabbi approaches you and just says, "Come and follow me." And being a person of Jewish descent, knowing what that call means, that it doesn't simply mean, "Come with me today," but what it really means is, "Come and be like me. Put on my yoke and follow me and do what I do." That's what this call of a rabbi means. And for the courage that it would take for someone like Matthew, who has been safe behind the customs post, has been safe probably with Roman guards, to step away from all of that and to follow this rabbi. Not just to preach, but to preach to people that probably hate him. And we see immediately, Jesus goes and dines at Matthew's house, and immediately Pharisees are following this. They're wondering what's going on, and they probably know who Matthew is. And instantly they start asking the disciples, what is going on here? Why is your teacher associating with these, as they would say, these terrible people? And we get the beautiful response of Christ. Those who are well do not need a physician, but the sick do. Go and learn the meaning of the words, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. And the story of the calling of Matthew is this beautiful, great reminder of the mercy of Jesus. But it is especially a good reminder that it is the same call that Christ gives to Matthew. It's the same call that Christ gives to us. That each of us, although maybe not in the same position as a tax collector and reviled by all society, each of us falls short in some way. Each of us have made the mistakes of hurting someone we care about, of thinking too much of ourselves at times and falling short. But yet, despite our very human inadequacies, Christ desires to take down the walls of our heart, to cast away all the guards that we've set up, to say, no, Jesus, I don't want that call. And he pushes all that aside and he says, come and follow me. We may say, I can't teach, I can't preach, I can't know the right words to say to somebody. But Christ just continues to say, come and follow me. So the question for us today as we reflect on the calling of St. Matthew, on this feast of St. Matthew, is we know that Christ is calling us in some way. But to what is he calling each of us? In our letter today from St. Paul, we see St. Paul express how each of us, through the bond of peace, one body and one spirit, we're called by one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And that in this call that each of us was given, grace was given to each of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. And to some he gave as apostles, others as prophets, others as evangelists, others as pastors and teachers, to equip the holy ones for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain the unity of faith, that each of us has received this call through our baptism. That the call to ministry is not simply for those who know how to speak, or those who work for the church, or those who wear a collar, but that call to ministry is for the entire baptized. As we are all baptized as priest, prophet, and king, as we each heard on the day of our baptism. And so today we reflect on Christ. What are you calling me to? And then as we meditate on this today, we also realize that as Christ has put that call in our heart, that as Christ has looked at our own personal inadequacies, the ways that we've fallen short, and says, that doesn't matter, I call you, that we recognize that that is true for everyone that we see day to day. That is true for the people that most get under our skin, for the people that most frustrate us, that is true for each person that we see. That Christ desires to push away those guards, to tear down those walls and say, come and follow me. That as much as we are the Matthew, to make sure that we are also not the Pharisee, who looks at someone who is trying to follow God's call and maybe slipping up, but to look at them and say, why do they think that they are worthy of this call? Because they have done X, Y, and Z, and they don't deserve this. And to remember the words of Christ, that Christ calls to come sinners, and not the righteous. And that each and every one of us is a sinner in some way. So today, as we enter into the Feast of St. Matthew, as we enter into the story of the call of St. Matthew, may we strive to be more like Matthew, someone fallen but willing to follow Jesus, and less like the Pharisee. And when we see someone doing their best but falling short, that we celebrate them and we help carry them along, as we are all disciples of the same God. Thank you for joining us this morning for morning meditation. We do this Tuesdays through Fridays. I'm your Wednesday host. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Peace.